Hello and welcome to the Virtuous Life. Here we are in the Advent season, and I have come across a book that was proposed to me by a publishing company. And if you listen to the show with any regularity, you kind of know that I rarely, very rarely do novels. I think I've only done, I tried to think over because I've been doing this show for 10 years. I think over the past 10 years, maybe two. Maybe I've done two novels, maybe three. So I usually don't do them. And yet, when he proposed this to me, the publishing company, I said, sure, send it. It sounds kind of interesting. So and so I finished it over the weekend, and I was really excited that the author could be with us today. I want to make sure I say her name right. I wrote it down, and that doesn't mean I'll do it well. But it's Abigail Favale, and she has her PhD. She's a writer, professor in the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. She writes across several genres, and her work has been translated into multiple languages. She is the author of The Genesis of Gender, A Christian Theory, and Into the Deep, an Unlikely Catholic Conversion. She was awarded the J.F. Powers Prize for Short Fiction in 2017. And the book we are going to be talking about today, Our Lady of the Sign, is her debut novel. Welcome, Abigail. So good to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
This is, well, first of all, looking at your academic background, right? I mean, you know, what you've written on before, all those kinds of things. Let's kind of jump in here and find out what made you want to shift into a novel.
Well, fiction's my first love, to be honest. So okay. I kind of live at the intersection of theology and literature and philosophy. Ooh. I just love those worlds and how they intersect. And,
yeah.
But I really love fiction. I started writing stories since I was a little girl. And then once I went to university, I began to have more of an intellectual and kind of philosophical awakening. But I haven't lost my love for fiction, but I've definitely prioritized nonfiction and more academic work since I became an academic. Right. So I have written short fiction before, but this was my first time successfully finishing long form fiction. So if it was really actually wonderful to be able to engage some of the questions and themes that I do in my nonfiction work, but in the mode of the imagination and story and narrative. So I really loved the process.
That's great. So I want to ask you, because as I read this book, I'm thinking, oh, wow, you know, there's so many truths in this book. Do you kind of think, I just kind of pick your brain here a little bit, do you think fiction offers kind of a non-threatening, more, I don't know, non-threatening isn't probably even the right word, but, you know, people are more open to evaluate and look at ideas and themes if they're presented in fiction versus in a nonfiction way?
I think that's true. I think you're getting at something important that's different about more conceptual, argument-driven work. And then something that is, I mean, what I love about fiction is that in a way it's incarnational, right? It's, even though it's verbal, we're dealing with words, it's telling a story that is grounded in kind of a concrete, embodied story where you have people, you know, in the world dealing with, you know, real problems and complexities. And so I think there is something disarming about that. And I also think fiction, this is too simplistic, but I think good fiction is kind of targeted at the heart, whereas nonfiction is often targeted at the mind or the intellect.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something which doesn't, and again, that's put too simply because I think really good fiction is also dealing with, you know, weighty ideas.
Sure.
And well-written nonfiction, you know, can very much, you know, touch your heart. But I think there's something about the genre of fiction that it allows you to kind of encounter a truth in an incarnate way rather than just a conceptual way.
Yeah.
that can be much more, I don't know, it can be much more moving, but also it can just strike differently, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would tend to think, you probably see this with your college students, I see it with mine, is that they, you can teach concepts, but until they can put a practical example to it, to know what it looks like in the real world, they really struggle. And I think that's what fiction can do, correct?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like it brings these, let's just take one idea I'm exploring in the novel about like a sacramental understanding of reality. Well, that's a very lofty sounding concept, right? And we
right.
talk about that theologically, and it's, which I love to do as well, but to actually draw that out, like what does it mean to see in that way? What would it mean for a person to live as if the world is sacramental, right? How would that look lived out? And I feel like fiction is kind of a realm that you see things lived out. Right, in a way that you don't in other kinds of writing.
Now, Abigail, I would think that, again, I've never written a novel, but I would think that, right, you might have these themes that you want to kind of pull into the book, and I do want to talk to you more about writing a novel, but and you probably have a concept of like, this is what I want to portray. So this is what you're hoping the reader picks up. Is one of the downsides, do you think, of fiction is that because it's, every individual might have their own interpretation of what's going on, they may miss the truth that you're trying to portray?
I guess that, yes. Okay, so I guess you could say like one of the limitations of fiction perhaps is there is something a little more ambiguous about fiction. I think good fiction, right? Because I think fiction that's overly didactic, that's trying to kind of teach a moral lesson, can almost suck the life out of it a little bit. Because then it starts to feel more like, someone's giving you kind of a moralistic talk or something, rather than here's a story that's going to like open your heart in a way that you don't expect, right? Because to have our hearts open, that, takes something a little more subtle and patient than, here's the lesson that I want to make sure you get. So I don't know. In this novel, I tried to strike a balance between, the cliche in fiction is show, don't tell. So I really try to show some of the ideas I want to explore. But I also, did not want it to be overly didactic. And honestly, in the process of writing fiction, it's very different in my experience than writing nonfiction. So I often did not have a clear sense in my mind of like, okay, this is the idea I want to convey in this story.
Really?
Like it was much more. It comes up from below.
Okay.
Much more than is imposed from above, I think. So it might be like, here, I'll just take one example.
Okay.
To make this a little more concrete. So the main character, Simone, is not religious. And at one point in the novel, she finds herself in a small Catholic church. And so, when I went into writing that scene, I wasn't thinking like, okay, I really want the reader to get a sense that, reality is sacramental, that the incarnation matters. I was really trying to think like, trying to remember, what is it like to be a non-Catholic in Mass?
Exactly.
What does it feel like? Like, what strikes you as weird? What jumps out at you? What seems appealing? What seems, repulsive? Right. And so and then in drawing that experience out, then the kind of the themes I want to engage with, themes of like the importance of incarnation and the body, those kind of arise in that discussion, right? So I feel like that's what's fun about fiction a little bit in my experience is, I guess the theological vision that I'm very much working with, it kind of comes in more organically rather than in this kind of top-down way.
Okay. So basically, since we're kind of talking in this area, let's kind of stick with this. So basically, when you said, okay, I want to write a novel, I'm going to kind of move away from all my academic stuff right now, and I'm going to write a novel. Did you have an overall theme in your head? Was there an idea? Did you have themes that you were going to tie into, this concept? Did you start with the main character? How did you start the process?
Okay, so in this, it's sort of funny. I was at my parents' house in Idaho. They live in Idaho in this very beautiful, snowy place, which is a different place than where the novel takes place. The novel does take place in Idaho, but and it was very wintry, and I had just read some kind of novel. I can't remember what it was, but it was a little bit spooky in kind of a fun way. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, why aren't there more Catholic novels that are a little bit spooky? Mm-hmm. We have so much to work with. Oh, yeah. As Catholics, in terms of there's a whole reality, there's this whole spiritual realm of, beings. There's a world, the invisible world beyond the visible, that sometimes breaks through in surprising and unsettling ways. There's, so much to work with. And so I just thought, I'll write one. That sounds fun. Oh. That was really the beginning of it. Okay. And then just the idea that came to me, and this is just the opening premise of the novel, is this main character who is feeling dissatisfied with her life. And she has this kind of dilemma that she's facing in the present that is not explicitly stated in the beginning. Right. But she's kind of in a state of crisis in her life. And she, on a whim, she discovers that her old house where she used to live in rural Idaho, is now an Airbnb that you can rent it, and she hasn't been back to it in over 15 years. And she's just suddenly kind of possessed with the urge to go back there, even though she now lives in a totally different state, hasn't been back there in 15 years. And so on a whim, she goes back to this old house, she rents it, and she's running from something in her present. And then some unsettling things start to happen in the house. Right. And that was it. That was the premise, was like that you started with. Main character, in state of crisis, goes back to her old house, weird stuff starts happening. And I didn't know where it was going to go from there. Right. Wow. The more I sort of worked on it, the next part, I guess, that fell into place was where I wanted it to end. Okay. So for a while in the story, I knew the beginning and I knew the end, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen in the middle. Okay. And so there were some times where I was surprised at writing it, where I would get to a scene where I'm not sure what's going to happen at the end of this scene or after it. And then it's in the writing of it that the narrative will kind of move in a certain direction. Yeah. And I just kind of followed it. So, so that's how this novel began. Yeah. I must admit, Abigail, I started reading it and I'm trying to figure stuff out. It's like, what's going on here? And it's like, I was confused, and I know, I know it's kind of got mystery involved here, and I didn't want to read the ending. I wanted to keep it in line, but I don't remember exactly where it was. It might have been around, I don't know, page 100 or 120. And it just takes off. I mean, it was like, okay, now I can't go to bed now because I got to finish this, because it was like, it's like you hit this one spot in the novel and man, it takes off and you just feel like you're flying and through this, through all of what's going on with her, till you get to that ending. And I told somebody it was, and all those things you were kind of building towards, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the way she's laying this out is just so, I mean, it's kind of, again, it's, I teach a lot of those concepts, right? Of the supernatural and the evil and the good and but, the way you kind of pull this all together, it was very, wow. I thought, I hope people read this because this is very,
just to me at least, all the messages that were kind of popping through there at the end, and just the healing of brokenness, all these things that are so imperative to who we are as Christians, and not wanting to deal with things. And, so it was just amazing. But I want to take you back to Simone. She's your lead character. She is a college professor. So I was curious by that, just because I wondered, did you choose that because it was something you knew, or was it just, you just felt like this is who this person should be?
I think initially when I was describing how I got the idea for the novel at my parents' house, I literally sat down and I hand wrote, which is weird because I don't actually usually handwrite. But I didn't have my laptop with me, and I just hand wrote, I think, the first couple of pages. So that first interaction with Peter, and so it just came out that way. Okay. And then once, and it kind of makes sense in a way that I would write sort of from what I know. Yeah. So, but it wasn't like I kind of decided ahead of time, if that makes sense. Yeah. That I'm going to give her my job. I mean, and the fact that she's a professor isn't super important to the narrative. No. I think what's more important is that she has really bought into the narrative that what it means to live a meaningful life as a woman is to have a successful career and to, tick all the boxes. And so for me, because I had at the time I was writing this, I had done that in academia, and academia also has it does have a kind of long set of boxes to tick. Yeah. You get your degree, and then you get a tenure track job, and then you have to get tenure, and there's promotions along the way, right?
Oh,
so it lends itself well to this okay, here is your roadmap to success, and once you achieve it, you should feel amazing, and she doesn't, right? She still feels like there's something missing.
Yeah. And her character is so interesting. I mean, it's just, and her relationship with her mother is there's so many themes you pull in here so subtly. When you talk about, kind of the lies that she's been told over her life that she's kind of bought into. And part of that has come obviously from the way she was raised, with her mom. And so there's so many, themes that it's just like, oh my gosh. And it's not, it's not like a Hallmark movie.
Right.
It's not like, you're cheering for some romantic relationship here, but relationships are integral to the story too. Yeah. So there's just so much in here. It just amazed me as I kept reading. Well, I also, because we are in the Advent season, and I don't know if this is just a peripheral thing that you kind of put in the book, or if it's supposed to maybe have a little more meaning than what it could mean. But you do set the kind of the timeline of the book happens in the season of Advent. Was that chosen for a reason, or was that just, she's in church, it would be nice to have an Advent wreath, No,
I mean, it is chosen for a reason. Okay. Yes. So the whole novel takes place in the last week of Advent. So it's a very concentrated story. It unfolds over just a handful of days. Yeah. But there is, Advent is a very pregnant season. Yes. If that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
It's just
waiting,
full of
watching,
and anticipation. And, I've just been thinking about this, doing the Liturgy of the Hours and celebrating Advent every night with my family. And every night we're there's language in the songs and the prayers about what is to come, what is coming, right? And so I think that relates to both the kind of feel of the novel in the sense that it is a thriller. It is meant to be kind of a page turner, that you're kind of meant to, like, as you're reading, feel like what's coming, like there's something coming and I don't know if I like this or not.
Yeah.
And there are different things that are kind of breaking into Simone's world, and she doesn't quite know what's good, what's evil.
Yep.
And so that's part of the kind of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So she's in this state of, like, she's kind of suspended before this, like, very profound encounter that she has at the end, that I don't want to get into too much detail about.
Yes.
But it's very much, it very much engages with the themes of Advent, the themes of, like, the child who is to come, themes of, the mother who is expectant, themes of God breaking into our world in the incarnation. These are all realities that Simone has kind of been hiding from, that she is kind of faced with in a really powerful way. So, yeah, Advent's kind of the perfect time.
Yeah,
and plus it's got to be snowy. It's got to be cold.
Sure.
It has to be this. It's a wintry tale. Yeah. So that also helped.
Played into it, yeah. But the more I thought about it, because you don't really, I think it's only mentioned once, in the sense of when she is in church and sees the Advent wreath. It's not like you bring up Advent constantly throughout the book, but that one little clue, as I continued to read, and when I finished it, I thought, she had to want this to be set in Advent, because it is the perfect season, in the sense of, like you were saying, this, you're preparing, and that's kind of what you're doing in the book. You're preparing us as we're going along. We get to know her, we get to know, but it's not until the end that we really see what God has in store, in a sense, and how she is touched by all of this. And so it's like, it was just a kind of a perfect season for that, I thought. And the whole play of light and darkness too, right? The light that shines, that it's, that we start this season of Advent in, like, total darkness. There is this sense, and you sense that in her at the beginning of the book. Yeah. And she makes this progress through toward what we would in the end consider kind of the light, in a way, but again, don't want to give the ending away. It's not what people think. You got to read the book to know. But I do want to go back to that lead character a little bit. And I want to maybe tie it to something larger, Abigail, is we've got about 5 minutes left in this first half. I want to tie it to this sense, because you talk about, the lies and the ideology. We talked a little bit about that. These are the things that are supposed to make women happy, be successful. And we're certainly seeing in our society, at least a lot of the, surveys and things like that have been completed on women and their happiness. It appears that women are not happy overall. That doesn't seem to be what surveys are telling us. Do you think part of that is this, what the book would say is kind of a lie that's been sold to women about who we are and how we are to live? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme in the novel. And I will say, lest I be misunderstood.
Right.
I'm not pushing back against that narrative in the way that says that women should never have careers, they should never work. I mean, that's hypocritical. I have a career. So it's not. But I think what the narrative that I'm pushing back is not about women having careers per se. It's that the most important value in life for a woman is autonomy. Mm. And that, she fulfills herself through professional success. Mm-hmm. And she can only do that by minimizing bonds and minimizing relationships. Mm. And fleeing things like motherhood, especially. So the kind of narrative that motherhood oppresses women and careers free women.
Right.
That's one of the narratives that I'm kind of pushing back against. And the character Simone in the novel, she very much inherits this from her mother. Mm-hmm. who is also a physician, right? So her mother has her own kind of history of being hurt and betrayed by the men in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has kind of has made her name's Cynthia. So Cynthia's the mother figure. So Cynthia has very much leaned into this narrative in her own life, right? So autonomy is prized for her. And because she's also a doctor, one of the other sort of narratives I was kind of pushing back against is how femaleness in our culture is pathologized.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So this ties into the autonomy thing. But, in order for women to be free and to have this prize of autonomy, we have to kind of go to war with our own bodies. We have to go to war with our capacity for motherhood, with our fertility. And Simone's mother, again, has very much bought into that narrative that, motherhood and pregnancy are often oppressive for women. And in order for women to be free, what they need is access to abortion and contraception. And so that's kind of Simone has grown up in that story. Right. And so that's kind of the story that she's believed. And so, I'm definitely engaging with that in the novel. Yeah.
Well, as we go into break, Abigail, that could be like a sequel. You could write on her mother after the end of this experience.
I know. Yeah. Well, I wanted to make sure that, Cynthia in some ways is, she's kind of she's a complex. I wanted to make sure she was complex, right? I didn't just want to have this like evil kind of stepmother sort of figure. Because she has her own wounds that she's dealing with, right? And there's a reason why she's bought into that narrative. That's another thing that I think is important. Like there's a reason why, certain feminist narratives have become so compelling for women, right? It often comes from places of, betrayal and
brokenness. Yeah.
So yes, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, before you start your next novel, we'll finish talking about this one, but we are at break. So let the audience know who we're talking to today. We are talking to Abigail Favale. She is a PhD. She's a writer, professor at the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. She writes across several genres, and her work has been translated into multiple languages. And the book, we're talking about her first novel, which was very compelling, and it's called Our Lady of the Sign, and we'll talk more about that in the second half of the show. Come back on the other side of the break. You're listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.
Jesus Christ is literally and wholly present, body and blood, soul and divinity, under the appearances of bread and wine. In the Bread of Life discourse documented in John chapter 6, Jesus states that he is the bread of life, and that his flesh is true food and his blood true drink. The Jews were scandalized in verse 52. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Jesus does not back down, but reiterates this teaching 4 more times over the next 4 verses. Many left in verse 66 because this teaching was truly difficult. But at no point does Jesus water down his teaching and call them back. No, he allows them to leave, and even questions his 12 apostles if they too wish to leave. Jesus intended to be understood literally, and the Jews, apostles, and the Catholic Church absolutely take him at his word. Examining the truths of the Catholic faith, this is faithforensics.org.
Experience the incredible story of a woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica, grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Canton, Ohio during the Great Depression. Rita's father abandoned the family before she was 5 years old. Her early years of trial were compounded by a debilitating illness until she was healed by Jesus through a woman named Rhoda Wise. That healing set her life on a course that would ultimately change the world. Learn the amazing story of Rita Rizzo at the Mother Angelica Museum in her hometown of Canton, Ohio. Go to www.motherangelicamuseum.com. Be inspired. Plan your visit now at motherangelicamuseum.com.
Welcome back to The Virtuous Life. And today we have with us Abigail Favale. She is a PhD writer, professor in the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. And she writes across several genres, and her work has been translated into multiple languages. She's the author of The Genesis of Gender, A Christian Theory, and Into the Deep, an Unlikely Catholic Conversion. She was awarded the J.F. Powers Prize for short fiction in 2017. And the book we are talking about today, if you've listened to the first half, you know we're kind of dancing around things because we don't want to give things away in this mystery novel here. It's very good, and I would encourage you to pick it up. It's a great Advent book, and that might sound kind of weird because it's not a kind of Advent book that we might be thinking of, but it's called Our Lady of the Sign, and this is her debut novel. Abigail, thanks again for taking this time to be on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great so far.
Well, you know, I kind of thought about that. It's kind of weird to call it an Advent novel, but I think, you know, we we think of Advent, books as, meditations on Christ, the coming of Christ and all these kinds of things. But when I read it, and even just for some reason, the title, obviously, I thought, I didn't even realize at that time it had anything to do that you had Advent in the book. And I thought, you know what? For some reason, I think this would be a good Advent show. And so it worked out perfectly. And I want to take you to the name of the book, because I've had other people on the show that tell me, they want to name the book one thing and then their publisher names it something else. So, and Our Lady of the Sign is an interesting title for this book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So Our Lady of the Sign is a reference to an ancient image of the Virgin Mary, an icon that depicts Mary kind of upright with her arms lifted, almost in the orans position, kind of in the, like when the priest kind of lifts his hands, to pray. So Mary has her hands lifted up, and then on her chest, in kind of an orb, is the Christ child. And so it's an image of the Annunciation, but it's also a reference to that prophecy from Isaiah about a virgin.
Oh, right.
This shall be a sign. A virgin shall bear a son, and we should call his name Emmanuel, which, of course, is a very important, again, imagery and language for Advent. It's a very ancient image of the Virgin Mary at the moment of the Annunciation as the Virgin of the Sign, which is another name for the icon, actually, the Virgin of the Sign. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, were you familiar with this before you wrote the book?
I was familiar with the icon, yes. In fact, it's funny. I first encountered this image and the name of that image at the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth.
Oh,
so in
no
2019,
kidding.
I know, it's funny. In 2019, I went to Israel, and when I was at the Church of the Annunciation, I went to confession. And at the end of confession, the priest there gave me a holy card. And on it was the image, Our Lady of the Sign. That's what it said, Our Lady of the Sign. So, I feel like this particular image of Mary came to me right, from the Annunciation where it happened, which is sort of amazing when I think about that now. So
no kidding.
That's where I first became aware of it. And I didn't know when I started the novel that it would have anything to do with this.
Really?
Yeah, but one of the things that happened in the course of writing the novel, I took a trip to this small town in southern Indiana that I can't even remember the name of right now. It's a strange little town. I think it has a history of some kind of weird, utopian cult that lived there. I don't know, 100 years ago or something. Anyway, I was there. I need to remember the name of this place, but I was there in a conference center or something doing a retreat with some faculty and giving some talks. And in the area where we were, there was a side chapel that had deep I think it's probably the most incredible icon I've ever seen. It's huge.
Oh my gosh.
And it was an icon of Our Lady of the Sign, but the most elaborate one I've ever seen, because it still had that image of Mary in the middle. But then it just goes on. It's basically like an icon of the entire cosmos. I mean, it really is amazing.
Wow.
And I was blown away by it. Yeah. And so I took a bunch of pictures of it. And it was, I think it's that image that I have in my mind when I'm describing, because Simone in the novel she sees an icon of Our Lady of the Sign in that little church, kind of like I did, right?
Right.
And so what I'm describing in that moment is this icon that I encountered in that little Indiana town randomly.
Wow.
But it's just such a beautiful image of, again, like of the entire kind of Christian view of the cosmos. Really.
Yeah.
And so for Simone, it's like this encounter with an entirely different understanding of reality that she's ever known. And so that's kind of how the image itself became part of the novel as I wrote.
Wow.
As I wrote it.
Yeah. Because like I said, I had never heard of Our Lady of the Sign. So what you normally do, you just Google it. So I Googled it, and a lot of different kind of things came up. Parishes. There's a parish in Florida that's named Our Lady of the Sign, which I was like, oh my gosh, their parish is named this. But they also talk about it being more of an Eastern icon. And so I just wondered, is that kind of what you kind of found out about it too? It was more Eastern, but yet obviously icons are a part of our, our history too, in the Roman rite, but it tends to be more of an Eastern rite. Yeah. So I was just...
so it's
please go ahead.
It is an older, so it predates the schism, right? So it's one of these images that is, around in early Christianity, in the traditions of what would eventually both become Western and Eastern Christianity. But yes, it absolutely is, an image in the East, as well as the West. And in fact, I encountered it first, technically in the East, right? In Israel. So, even though I was in a Western church, I was in, the kind of Christian East, so to speak. So, I think it's an image that belongs to both of us.
Yeah. It's interesting to see. I just then started obviously scrolling through icons of it, and it's so interesting to see it because it's a lot of times there are not just the orb with the Christ child in, but there are other orbs, but I couldn't see close enough in the just online in some of these pictures as to what or who was in the other orbs that seemed to sometimes surround it. Now, was the one that you experienced in Nazareth, was that just Our Lady with the orb of the Christ child, or was there more orbs around that? Because it just fascinates me that they might include other things.
It was just a simple image of, it was just Our Lady in that one. It was the large one that I saw in Indiana. And I wish I knew, who made it. I mean, it was just incredible. It was so random that it's there in Indiana, in this tiny town. But I don't even know who wrote that particular version of the icon or where it came from. I don't know anything about it.
Right.
But that one had a much more elaborate kind of whole cosmos on it. But most of the time, it's just Mary, and then
with the Christ child,
she kind of has a halo, and then Christ is on. But it's interesting because he's not Christ isn't. What's unusual about the imagery is that Christ is not in her hands. She's not holding him.
Yes,
it's not even really her womb necessarily.
No,
it's kind of high up on her chest.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is almost like this image of God coming in through a portal, almost in that moment of Annunciation, entering from one reality into another. And so it's a very compelling image.
Yeah. And I looked at one that was actually by an an iconographer. I think I said that wrong, but I always get my which syllable am I supposed to pronounce? But anyway, he made this beautiful icon of Our Lady of the Sign, and he talks about. He actually kind of explains parts of it, especially the circles that they're infinity, and he talks about harmony and balance and all these kinds of things. And so it's kind of cool to look at someone who is creating this image and what they're seeing, and excuse me, and how they are, how they're depicting it and why they're depicting it that way. And it gives you a little more insight probably into the whole idea of why these were depicted the way they were. So let's kind of go back then to its connection to the book. So you really hadn't planned on putting Our Lady of the Sign into it. You just got to that point as you were writing, and this was kind of, you were inspired, this is the perfect place to put this in. And then that's how you came to the title? Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, so the icon was integrated into the novel. And then once that fell into place, it was such a key image. Like, it kind of brought everything together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then that was where the title came from. Yeah, so the title came in once the icon came in.
I find it interesting but again, it would agree with how you explained your process at the beginning, because it seems so, to have this kind of pivotal icon, but yet you weren't planning on using it. It just kind of, as you said, came up from the depths, like it's supposed to be here, kind of thing. That's amazing. You just happened to recall it as you were writing.
Well, I was actually during the writing that I went to that Indiana town, and so that was where.
Okay.
What I can't remember is whether I was already thinking of that image already, or if that. So I can't even remember now. But that was pretty early on in the process of writing.
Okay. And you saw that.
So, but yeah, that's one thing I love about fiction, is that there's something. It's almost like you're kind of walking down a dark path, and you have maybe a flashlight, and you kind of can illuminate a bit of the path that's ahead of you, but you don't really know what's beyond it. And so I found it to be, in some ways, like a more prayerful, kind of receptive way of writing, if that makes sense, than writing nonfiction. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a much more inspirational process, where you open yourself to what most of us would say is the inspiration of God or the Holy Spirit moving you through this process, to give God glory. So that makes all kinds of sense to me. That's so much different. I mean, that's so different from an academic approach to something where you've got your outline and B has to follow A, and it's all got to make sense, and you got to kind of wrap it up nice and neat. This really, I can understand what you're saying now when you talk about the flow of this. So as you look at this project that you've completed, were you one of those people that, okay, I'm done, and it is what I want it to be? Or did you think, I got to go back and rewrite this, or I got to go back and look at that? Or how did you manage that at the end?
Well, so when I finished the draft, I sent it off to get some editorial feedback, And so one of the editors that I worked with at Ignatius had a couple of scenes that he thought I could make better.
Okay.
And that was really helpful, because that feedback was completely right. And so I did return and reworked a couple of very key scenes, which didn't change like the substance of them, but it just kind of, it just made the writing better, and the kind of setting clearer. And then the rest of the editorial process was really just a whole lot of polishing, just getting rid of repeated words and, clarifying things. And so that more fine-tooth comb kind of editorial path, and so that was the next kind of stage,
Okay.
and then it was done. Yeah.
I just can't imagine, pulling all this together. But like you said, you just kind of let it unfold. And so since we are in the season of Advent and you have this book, Our Lady of the Sign, I just want to kind of pick your brain a little bit because certainly with your background too, theology, the humanities, how do you see the Blessed Virgin Mary not just as she comes in as Our Lady of the Sign in this novel, but how do you see her as a light for women as a whole? Does that make sense during this Advent season?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I think Mary is the perfect creature, right? In the sense of, by creature, I mean a created being, because Christ, of course, is not a creature, but is the creator, right? But in terms of a human being that is created by God, Mary shows to us kind of the full perfection of what a human creature can be, and what her greatest power is her ability to say yes to God, right? And because she is kept free of, we just had, the Immaculate Conception feast on Monday, like 2 days ago, right? So because of her Immaculate Conception, her freedom from original sin, her yes is totally free. And that's one of the things that is so unique about Mary, is that her yes to God is given in total freedom. And then the consequence of that yes completely shifts the entire course of humankind, completely changes the human story, and opens the door to our redemption. And so Mary's yes is the greatest power. And that is one of the things I was exploring in the novel. Is like the greatest power of a woman is not autonomy. The greatest power of the woman, and in fact, that the greatest human power that the woman represents is our power to say yes to God, and for that yes to then transform not only our life, but the lives of everyone around us. Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of ability to learn to say yes to God, for us, because we're not protected from original sin in the way that Mary was. She is unique in that way. Our yes to God also entails a no to evil, right? So we have to learn how to say yes. We also have to learn how to have a very strong no. And so in many ways, the novel is about Simone learning both of those things. Simone learning how to say no to evil and also how to say yes to God. And that is what Mary embodies, I think, more than anything, especially in that moment of Annunciation, which I think is another reason why the Our Lady of the Sign image is so compelling, because it's in that moment of Annunciation. It's that yes opening the doorway to the Incarnation, opening that which comes through her very being, through her body, right? So there's also this profound dignity of the body.
Yes.
And of motherhood, the female body in particular,
right?
That is shown in this image, and that is shown through Mary, and what an elevation that is of female human nature specifically. That is how God chose to come and save us.
Yeah, right.
Is by becoming human through Mary. And that profound union with her, that I think is just such an incredible mystery. We could spend our lives contemplating it and still barely touch the surface. So,
yeah, very true.
It's that mystery that Simone is just beginning to see.
Yeah.
By the time the novel closes, she's encountering that mystery and how it echoes even in her own life and her own choices.
Yeah. Yeah, that I love that about the book. I just there were so many things. Like I said, that when the threads all start coming together, then it's like, oh, okay, and it really does, I think, speak to so many things. Again, in our world today, even though you're looking at it through the lens of this one person, this young woman. And yet these are the things, all of her struggles. These are the things that are around us all the time. And so the idea of certainly how do we deal with them? And during this Advent season, we're certainly reminded of, like you said, the incarnation. God comes to us, and what that means in our lives. So as you look at this novel, Abigail, are you... And I know you should never look ahead. You're still basking in the glow of finishing your first novel. But is fiction going to be something that you think you'll continue in the future, or are you going to be more academically inclined? Where are you at with all this right now?
Yeah. Well, I'm the kind of person that sort of takes, I don't necessarily make like 5-year plans or something. But right now, what I would say is I like both modes. I really do like writing nonfiction, but I loved writing this novel, and it's so gratifying to see it out in the world and to hear people's experiences of reading it and to hear people connecting the dots that I hoped they would connect.
Yeah.
And so that, so I would love to do both. I would love to kind of in the future toggle back and forth between maybe a nonfiction book or a fiction book. I think what's trickier about fiction is that, at least in my experience, and I almost have to be, an idea has to kind of come to me, a fiction idea. I can't force it.
Right.
And so even though I might say like, I want to write another novel, I can try to feed the muse, but I need to kind of, have some sort of story kind of swoop down and land on my shoulder. And then I'm like, even if it's just the seed of a story, right? Which is what happened with this novel. It was just the very, very beginning premise in the first couple of pages. So I very much want to write another novel. I do not currently have an idea.
Right. You're just going
So it's just speculative at this point. But yes, I am hopeful that this will not be the first.
Yeah.
Or it will be the first, but not the last.
Well, not the last, yeah. So I want to kind of go back, something I just saw in my notes as I was taking, as you were writing. I want to go back to, you made mention in the first half of the show as we're talking a little bit about the book without trying to give too much away. But we talked about the idea of her, of Simone, your lead character, is showing up at a Catholic church. She's not Catholic, and there are many reasons why she ends up there. Throughout the book, different things pop up. But you said you were trying to figure out what would this look like to someone who had no religious background. It is. I don't know your story. I don't know. Did you come to the Catholic faith? Were you born Catholic? Could you draw on your own experience to try to figure out what she would think is weird? How did you do that?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I am a convert to Catholicism. Okay. So I've been Catholic for almost 12 years now.
Okay.
So I did draw on that. I explicitly thought, okay, what was it like? Because when I became Catholic, I lived about 2 blocks away from our local Catholic church.
Oh, wow.
So there were a couple of times when I randomly walked in. So I have these memories of, as a non-Catholic, of going to Mass. And so I tried to draw on my own memories of being in that, and having Mass be unfamiliar. Yeah, but it's funny. The longer I'm Catholic, the harder it is to remember not being Catholic. Part of writing this novel was to try to remember, like, how did I used to think about this particular thing? Or how did I used to see the world? How did I used to perceive reality? And then to kind of draw on those experiences. Yeah.
Because when I was reading, I thought that would be hard for me. I mean, cradle Catholic all my life. So it would be hard for me to think about what would somebody think if they walked into a Catholic church, without any background at all, because it all makes so much sense to me, so it would almost be like you'd have to pick the mind of somebody else. And did you do that anywhere through the book? Was there anything that you were writing where you thought, I need to talk to somebody that might have had this experience or might understand this better? Or did you just basically draw on your own ability to pull these things together?
Yeah, I mean, it's a work of imagination.
Okay.
But of course, any writer is always drawing on experience, like whether it's my own private experience or maybe the experiences of people I've known or even things I've read, that's all in the mix. So I didn't do any specific interviews or anything.
Okay. I just wondered.
This project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a good book, Abigail. Your first novel, I think, and again, I recommend that people grab this and read it. If you're, I liked it as an Advent book, but like I said, it's not your normal Advent book.
Right, yeah.
But you certainly can look back and piece all of this together with where this all goes. And so I thank you for this. This is truly a gift. And I thank you for Our Lady of the Sign. This was something new for me. So it got me to look more at that and to even look at the icon and pray with it. It was wonderful. So thanks so much.
Oh, wonderful. I love that. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk to you about it.
Well, that's great. And I want to let our audience know today, our guest, Abigail Favale. She has her PhD. She's a writer, professor in the McGrath Institute for the Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. She writes across several genres, and her work has been translated into multiple languages. She's the author of The Genesis of Gender, a Christian Theory, and Into the Deep, an Unlikely Catholic Conversion, awarded the J.F. Powers Prize for Short Fiction in 2017. And today's book, hopefully you weren't frustrated by our conversation, so we didn't want to give too much away, but it is about her first novel, Our Lady of the Sign. And I would encourage you, if you like a little spookiness, this is a good book to pick up, and a lot of themes in here that you can pick up and even see God at work in the midst of all of this. So again, Abigail, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Happy Advent.
It's Happy Advent, and Happy Advent to the audience. You've been listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.